As I said in last part about the function of the cell membrane, the another function of the cell membrane is a cell signaling, reception of the signals and transduction in the cells. Cell signaling communicate one cell to another cell to regulate their development in tissue, to control their growth and division, coordinate their function. Cell signaling done in the cell by communicating junction or gap junction, and also some signaling molecules that we want to know more about this type of signaling. In cell signaling pathway, at least there are two types of cells, sending cell and target cell. Sending cell is the cell that sends the message, or it releases the ligand, and target cells include the receptor for this ligand. The ligand joins to the receptors, and the target cell responds to this stimulation. Signaling molecules that produced by signaling cells, such as hormone, for example, join to their receptors in the cell membrane, and then after the joining of the receptor and signaling molecule that named reception, some mechanism activate in the cell that this mechanism named signal transduction pathway, that they transfer the message to the target cell. After that, the target cell receives the message and responds to it, and finally activate the cellular response. But in the body, there are some cells that are not target cells. These cells no receptors for ligand, such as hormones that released in the bloodstream, but some cells have the special receptor for each of them. There are different type of signaling, that one of them is endocrine signaling. In the endocrine signaling molecule produced by endocrine or the signaling cells, it released to bloodstream, the hormones carried out by bloodstream, and finally the receptors located on target cell. Paracrine signaling, the chemical materials, signaling cell again release the chemical materials as mediators. These materials rapidly metabolized and act to unlocal the cells. As you see here, the signaling cells release the mediator, and they act locally, and target cell located close to the signaling cell. But in the juxtacrine signaling, that is very important in the embryonic interaction and embryo development, the signaling cell and target cell are very close together. They are neighbor together, adjust together, that the signaling cell remain in the part of the cell surface and bind to the receptors of target cells that located adjust to it. Autocrine signaling signals and receptors on the same cells, cell or same cell type, that produce the messenger molecule and join to its receptor, to the cell itself or to the same cell. And the last one is a synaptic signaling or neuronal signaling. That is a special kind of paracrine interaction that occurred in the nervous system. The neurotransmitter act to adjust molecule, that this part named the synapse, that you know about it more in the nervous tissue. Another subject in the cell signaling is the signaling molecule receptors, the receptors, type of receptors, and how they can do their function and activation, the receptors. There are three types of receptors in the body. One type of them named channel-linked receptors. It means these receptors, yes, this channel is closed and this channel acts as a receptor. When ligand joined to its receptor, the channel open and ion exchange between of the cell and extracellular matrix. These receptors activate by the joining of the ligand and the receptors and the channel open. Another type are the enzymatic receptors that they activate by enzyme. The ligand don't join to its receptors, then the protein kinase enzyme not activate. When the ligand joining to its receptors, this protein kinase activate. It means that is phosphorylate, and finally this activated enzyme turn off or turn on another molecules. But most common receptors in the cell is a G protein coupled receptors. This is a receptors, ligand joined to its receptors. The joining of the binding of the ligand to the receptors change the conformational structures of the receptors. The GTP activate the G protein, activated G protein transfer attached to other receptors. Maybe this act as a effector, maybe is a channel or enzymatic receptors. Activate some effector proteins as secondary message in the cell cytoplasm, and finally some protein kinase enzyme activate, and finally the enzyme turn on or turn off and do its function. But about the hydrophobic transduction molecules, you know this molecule can pass easily from cell membrane, because the cell membrane include two phospholipid bilayer, and these hydrophobic molecules such as estrogen and progesterone are steroid and can pass by diffusion from cell membrane. They diffuse by cell membrane. Their receptors located in the cell, the receptors in the intracellular. The binding of the molecule to its receptor activates some mechanism and cascade in the cell, and they do their function. This part is about the another function of the cell membrane, that is a communication and connection between cell and the cell signaling between of the cell. But briefly about the cell membrane or plasma membrane or plasmalemma or cytoplasmic membrane is a biological membrane that separates interior part of the cell from extracellular space that protect the cell from its environment. Cell membrane have different functions involved in the cell adhesion, ion conductivity, cell signaling, and also serve as an attachment surface for several extracellular structures that you know about. These structures in the connective tissue. You can study this part from chapter 2 of Basic Histology of Janqueira.